The OldPreMeds podcast, session number 87. The OldPreMeds podcast, session number 87. You're a non-traditional student entering the medical field on your terms. You may have had some hiccups along the way, but now you're ready to change course and go back and serve others as a physician. We're here to help answer your questions and help educate you on your non-traditional journey to becoming a medical student and then a physician. And welcome to the OldPreMeds podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here for this podcast, as well as many others. You can check out everything that we do at mededmedia.com. I would love for you to check out our newest podcast, might be out by the time you're listening to this, called Ask Dr. Gray, Pre-Med Q&A. Very similar to this podcast where I take questions from the oldpremeds.org forums. On the Ask Dr. Gray show, I actually live stream that to Facebook, and I'm taking the audio from that and turning it into a podcast. So students are emailing in questions, they're calling in questions, and a lot of it is just my thoughts that come up throughout the day as I'm working with students, reading personal statements, reading secondary essays, doing mock interviews, so on and so forth. Which brings me to my next point. If you are interested in working with me, you can do so. Just go to the oldpremeds.org forums. There's a Our Services tab or menu at the top there, and that will show you everything that I can do to help you on your journey. All right, we're going to dive into the question today from oldpremeds.org forums. We take those questions, answer them here on the podcast. All right, Facebook, that was episode number 1, actually episode number 85. And I have one more episode to cover that I want to record today. And we will get into that. And it's a little bit more of a better question. Not a better question, but actually a question that I can give a little bit more definitive answer to. So let's go ahead and jump into that one. All right, so the next question that we have directly from the oldpremeds.org forums is a question from somebody who didn't put their name, from Mir. M-I-R is their username. And Mir says, I'll call him a he. Mir says, I am an old pre-med, got all my prereqs, and currently working on preparing for the MCAT. But one of my biggest gaps is not having clinical or patient contact experience. I have done plenty of basic lab research, but not in a clinical setting. I work full-time, and therefore finding experience could be challenging. I recently came across this organization that runs a volunteer ambulance site, and they do need volunteers. The entry-level volunteer is a dispatcher, which requires 4 to 6 weeks of training. Now, I would like to volunteer because obviously I'm thinking of counting this as quote-unquote clinical patient experience for my application, but my question is, would this type of experience, being a dispatcher at a volunteer ambulance organization, count at all? The website also says that once dispatcher training is completed, the person may ride in the ambulance as an EMS attendant and also get CPR and first aid training, which I would definitely do. Of course, I would do this during the weekend since I work full-time. Any thoughts or anyone with similar experience? I don't want to submit an application without being sure this would count towards clinical or patient experience. So this is a good question, and definitely I am glad that this student is looking into it, because not having any clinical experience, any patient exposure is not good for the application. So the fact that he's thinking about it now is great. Being a dispatcher, there's a saying in the pre-med advising world, in the medical school admissions world, that you have to be close enough to smell the patient for clinical experience, to call it clinical experience. So as a dispatcher, it would not be clinical experience. You're not interacting with the patients in any way other than the phone call, really just gathering information and dispatching people. It's kind of interesting. You may think, and I'm thinking this as I'm giving the answer, like, well, there may be some calls where you're talking to a suicidal caller and talking them through and keeping them on the phone line while the ambulance arrives and police arrive, and that's pretty cool. I mean, you're not close enough to smell the patient. Maybe if we had aromaphones or something, maybe you could smell them. So I wouldn't count it as clinical experience. The other aspects of that, once you get through your training, the ability to do the ride-alongs and CPR and first aid, all of that other stuff is great and great experience. For clinical experience, if you are strapped for time, and working full-time is not an excuse to not get anything done. I've worked with plenty of students who work multiple jobs and are still preparing for the MCAT, getting clinical experience, doing other things. So I know life can get busy, but if you plan and you schedule things at night, and maybe you get 1 hour less of sleep, and you don't play video games and watch a House of Cards and all that other stuff, there's plenty of time in a day to do that. So one thing that I highly recommend is going and calling Hospice, your local hospice organization, and getting involved with them. You typically don't need any long-term training, no certifications. Go and say, I'm a pre-med student. I've heard amazing things about hospice. I want to get involved and contribute and help patients, be there for them, care for them, whatever it is that you can do. Hospice is an amazing organization with an amazing mission, and the ability to care for patients as they transition out of this life is phenomenal and great clinical experience. So that is what I recommend typically to students who are looking for clinical experience who can't find it anywhere else. Go check out Hospice in your area. All right, I hope that was helpful for you. A couple quick mentions one more time. AMSA Pre-Med Fest, November 4th and 5th in Tampa at USF. Go to amsapremedfest.org. Use the promo code MSHQ17 to save some money off your registration by October 25th, 2017. August 21st and 23rd, Anaheim. The 21st, I'll have a meetup, a dinner. And August 23rd is the Academy of Podcasters award ceremony. If you can make that, shoot me an email, ryan@medicalschoolhq.net. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time here at the Old Pre-Meds podcast and MedEd Media.